Welcome to Beyond the Dragon, where we explore indie tabletop role-playing games and their design to inspire you to play them or take what you like for your own creations. Hi there, my name's Oscar.
And I'm Sun.
We're both tabletop game designers and professional game masters who love tabletop RPGs. Today we'll be discussing Light. Light is the ancestor of the Lumen engine and all games that use it. Light was published by Spencer Campbell, also known as Gilla RPGs, on November 25th, 2020. The game was designed to be a fast-paced, rules-light sci-fi dungeon crawler. The game takes a noticeable inspiration from the series Destiny, but makes noticeable efforts to keep its own thing. The game is 16 pages in totals, with a reasonable price tag of pay what you want. The game is the progenitor of the Lumen engine, as I mentioned, and it will feel very similar to anyone familiar with a Lumen game, but it does have a bit of differences. Players have 3 stats, Pyre, Volt, and Nether, which correspond to strength, speed, and planning, respectively. Each point in a stat grants a d6 to be rolled with when you are using that stat. Players take their highest die for the result, with a 1 to 3 being a failure, a 4 to 5 being a success that is reduced or with a negative consequence, and a 6 being a success, getting exactly what you want. If you have a 0 in a stat, you roll 2d6 and take the lowest of the two. Players also have Light, a resource that can be used to re-roll a roll, use a power, or revive from death to full HP. Light's ability to revive dead players will be looked at more in combat, as it gets a little bit intricate. Light's engine is straightforward and to the point. The rules fit on a single page. It's nice, it's simple, and it's very modular, which I also quite like. How do you feel about Light, Sun?
Yeah, no, I really enjoy Light, and like the things that make me go, oh, that's so weird. Are really just the odd quirks it has for being the originator of Lumen, because I'm more used to Lumen's standard procedures. I keep forgetting that Light sometimes doesn't have some of those things. For me, I like its simple dice pool. Just take the highest d6, and you're going to get 3 different states. You know, failure with a consequence, success at a reduced effort or at a consequence, and success with no consequence. Nice and simple. I really like what Light provides for fast-paced action, simple gameplay.
I couldn't agree more. What do you feel is a standout supporting feature?
For me, I think standout supporting feature is really how powers work. With standard games, whenever you want to do something, you roll a die, see if it works or it doesn't. Powers, they just happen. You spend a resource of Light, and the power just works. And each of the 3 classes, they get 3 powers, and these kind of define those classes. Sure, they get like a couple extra things, but the 3 powers that you get is what the class is. And yeah, that is one of the things that really stood out to me for Light and all the other Lumen games, and is something that I will I will take with me and always think back to Light.
Definitely easy to activate abilities is something that I also like about Light, and it's something I have strayed away from, but it's definitely something I am looking for a way to see about getting back to without
Mhm.
doing the Lumen engine for my own reasons, just to kind of try new things. For me, one of the things about Light that really stood out was the fact that the game has a dedicated gameplay loop. Players go out on a mission called a strike. It's not necessarily just a dungeon crawl, but it is very much going out to a place, exploring and fighting there. It could be open air, it could be an actual dungeon, it could be a space station, whatever you want to call it. And then after returning from a strike, players get something in the book called a boon. It could be a boon that they themselves choose, or something that's offered for payment for the strike. It makes it so that you know exactly what you want to do when you play Light. You want to go on a strike. You're going to go out and you're going to do a job for someone, and you're going to fight some aliens.
Yeah, indeed. Very focused. and to the point. You know what you're going out to go do. A lot of the time, you've chosen it, and you know what reward you're going to get from it. Another thing that I really like is how the attributes work. Typically in like D&D related games, your attributes are strength, dexterity, charisma, and all that. These are how good you are at these types of uh, how good you are. Yeah. But with light, your attributes are ways of doing something. Are you doing this task with force? Are you doing it with speed? Are you doing it with caution? And how you decide what to roll is just through narration. That's like the idea. It's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna like run up to this person and just really just body them. It's like, okay, well, that sounds like you're using force there in that situation. So I really like how it's trying to bridge the gap of the narration and then rolling the dice.
Yeah, it's not skills, it's approach. You can brute force a computer, or you can, know where to look for the password ahead of time. It is very flexible.
Yeah. What about you?
One of the things that also it goes a bit back into strikes, the core gameplay loop and all, would be that it features factions that offer extra challenges to make strikes more unique and potentially more difficult. There are a number of potential modifiers, meaning that even if you're replaying an old strike, either from a published thing or just you want to do something a second time on a new campaign or any other number of options, taking these modifiers could make the challenge incredibly different, meaning that even, the same maps and the same enemies can always feel unique.
Yeah, and I like that. Harkening back to its video game roots. One of them is just do 10 headshots, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Where there's some fun things in there, and yeah, uh, it always is going to make each strike different, no matter if you're going to the same location. Definitely.
So, moving on to combat, would you like to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, sure. So combat. This is another standout for me. With combat, you would think once the enemies appear, roll initiative, and then roll your dexterity and order yourselves up. Nope. Once enemies appear, what are you doing, players? Just go. And the players just continue playing like they normally do. And when they roll badly, a consequence, that is when the enemies or the environment and situation react to them. So, this is when the enemies actually go, when you roll a consequence. So, it really puts the emphasis and power in the player's hands. Going back to the, I'll say power fantasy, of Destiny. This is, I think, the other standout from Light. It's quite different, and I really like how the players need to just keep going, and it was one thing that I had to adjust to, and I think the times that I ran it for my players that they had to adjust to it too. Did you get that experience when you were playing Light?
Uh, it definitely was a bit different. The idea that you had to just keep going until, a player rolled low and then an enemy got to do something. Every time that you do it with a new group, you can always feel like the first time that happens, like, there's a pause, there's a moment where, like, you can hear the gears turning of, wait, shit, I get to go again. Okay, what am I doing? And then they just snap into it. But I will say, each time it happened, by the end of the game, we always had a pretty good idea of what we were doing.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, that is just how combat works. And to flesh it out, Either you are using your weapon, any of the two guns that you have on you, or you're using a power and moving. And since we're talking about moving, range bands. There's no grids here. You're just going from close, nearby, and far. And anything beyond that, it's just beyond. And your weapons do flat damage. There's no rolling for damage die here. Your weapons are probably going to do 1 to 3 harm, sometimes 4. Maybe some of the tags that they have give special little rules on top of that. In terms of damage for you, well, you've got anywhere from, let's say 6 to about 10 health. And once your health reaches 0, you don't die. Not yet. You just mark a point of light, it becomes darkness, and you just get back into the fight, pushing on. Once you have no light left and darkness is filled up, that's when you die. So definitely your characters are quite powerful. What are your thoughts on combat?
Combat it's very smooth, it's very exciting. Players get to pop off exciting abilities and things like that. With the light is a down ticking thing. For people more familiar with Lumen games, unlike Lumen games where the GM will give power-ups at the end of the round based off of kills and the like to keep the action going, light has a constant downtick until players reach a point that is a light well, or unless someone has specific powers that give allies light, meaning that once you run out, you're out. Another thing about this is that dark does, like as I said, some very interesting things. It adds a die to every single roll you do. If dark is the highest die rolled, you take 1 harm and then treat the result as a step higher. 6s are now critical successes, 4 to 5s are 6s, and 1 to 3s are 4 to 5s. So taking a bit of dark does make you stronger, potentially, at a risk to yourself.
Yeah, I like the risk play there. And yes, the constant sapping of your resources as you continue pushing through the strike. And maybe at one point, your players are going, can we hold out until the next light well? Or do we need to adjust our strategy? Or even potentially call this quits and fail to strike? Anything else in combat? Because honestly, pretty simple, pretty snappy.
The other thing I'd say is that for people who like to know about their bestiaries, there are 16 enemies in the base book, divided up between 4 factions, and all the factions feel very distinct in their unique playstyles.
Yeah, and just to emphasize the power fantasy again, a lot of the enemies have anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 health. The big boys have like 4 5. So, and your weapons are going to have anywhere from 1 to 3. So, a lot of the time, each time you attack an enemy with your gun, they're going down.
Light is a style of combat I broadly agree with some exceptions. I like my combat. I like it fast and I like it punchy, but I like it fast and punchy on both sides, which is why I tend to run horror games and not light.
Which
But
we'll get
yeah,
into our thoughts further on.
yeah, but no, I light combat. Ultimately, you know what? The greatest compliment I can give to light's combat is that I think it ultimately defines how I think combat should work, and that players should be able to do something cool every round, and should not have to sit there grinding something down incredibly slowly over a long period of time. A fight where you can only do 1 to 2d6 damage against an enemy with 200 health split between 5 people is just a fucking nightmare, and Light solves it by just having simple health bars and fast action. It's great. One of Light's
Yeah,
absolute best features.
yeah, and thinking in like D&D terms, like the enemies just kind of work in like minion type style. They're going to go down quickly, and they're just reacting to the players. They're gonna dish out their harm. So you're gonna have probably more minions or waves of enemies coming in as the battle continues. And I run light using the concepts that Lumen further built out to try and further define some mechanics. But we can talk about that later. Shall we move on?
Yeah, so standouts. I mean, you did mention the classes and their abilities before, and for me, that is very much a standout. The classes in Light are very flavorful sounding and incredibly fun to read.
Yes. The classes, very simple. Completely based around the powers, and then, the starting weapon they get, their melee ability, and their special trait they only get, and then just how their health and light resources are divided up. And beyond that, that's it. But reading everything there, you get a very clear picture of what this class is.
What
For
about you?
me,
Yeah.
since this is a game about killing things with a weapon and getting boons and even finding new weapons while you're on strikes and building your own weapons, the gun generation and crafting. I really like how it's when you're determining your second weapon that you choose when you create a character. It's up to chance. You roll 2d6 to see what the base weapon is, and then you potentially roll an additional tag on top of that. And the tags are just additional rules, like AOE, does an explosion damage, backup clip. This is only for weapons that have the reload tag, and this one just says you don't have to reload as often. And that is a nice snippet of showing the vagueness of Light's rules. What does that mean? You're going to have to figure out with the group. You don't have to reload as often. Well, that could be just meaning every other time you need to reload. Or maybe you need to reload if the combat's been going for maybe 2 or 3 rounds. But I like the idea of like getting a rocket launcher, 4 harm, mid range, reload tag, AoE, but then also getting the where is it? I really like this one. The erupt thing. Enemies killed with this weapon explode in the element used. So if I'm using a rocket launcher and blasting them with pyre, just forceful, just laying waste to a battlefield, they're going to be exploding in fiery mess as well. And maybe they'll spread fire around the map. It doesn't state that, but in a narrative sense, that's how I would see it. And when you're crafting your weapons, you're going to be, rolling on those tags or deciding between what tags you want and taking tags off to replace them with other tags. So the fact that they have a gun generation system that I think is pretty decent works with the fact that this is based off a looter shooter.
Yeah, very true, very true. I also like the game is exactly as simple as it claims. In a bit before the recording, me and Sun were having a discussion about is this game a one pager, and I mean it is 16 pages long with extra stuff, but in terms of core rules, it really is 6 pages. Or sorry, not 6 pages, 1 page long. The entire core understanding of the game is 1 page long, and everything else is an extra mechanic that, for a modular game, could be tweaked or left in or out. Ultimately, it really is 1 page of rules, and then the rest are pages of flavor.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the one pager stance on this.
Well, yeah, because you
And
literally said that.
even the yes, but even the that is a good mindset to go in when reading this book. If you've played one pager games before and you start reading this book, and think that this is a one pager, I think you'll immediately like flow into this game quite easily.
Do you have any other standouts?
Honestly, because of how refined this game is, a lot of the standouts I've already said, like in the combat, like how attributes are ways of doing thing, powers are automatic thing, and how uh, there is no initiative, just enemies go when you fuck up. Yeah,
Very true. I
yeah.
do. I do have one more thing myself, which is enemies are really cool sounding and give a lot of ideas to kind of throw things at players. Like you encounter building. It's like these mini minions, this mini boss, and this thing. It's all very cool and very fun sounding.
Hmm. Actually, since you did say it, I think I'd want to say what an enemy looks like. Um, when you hear, oh, an enemy will react when you fuck up and they get to do something. Well, what is an enemy? An enemy is a little description, like 1 to 4 roughly health, a weapon, and then they have 3 moves. And these moves are, descriptive actions. Like one, a very simple one, charge forward, close the gap, regroup and retaliate. So if you had a bunch of enemies that were just this enemy, the crow, and a player screws up, you could, as they say, just do harm, or you can enact one of these 3 moves, or kind of transform the battlefield a bit with the enemies that you do have. And so these moves kind of inspire you on what those enemies would do. So you can just be like, okay, these enemies, you screwed up. They're going to close the gap. That's what these enemies are trying to do. They are just trying to get in to your face and also try and cluster up. So it's kind of like an inspiration of how they should act. And also, if you can't really think, just literally just follow the dot points right there.
Very true. Very true. So, criticisms.
Because of its, I will say, one-pagey nature, there's some vagary that might be a little bit too vague for some people, and with that vagueness can come with like slightly different ways of playing, and some people go, nah, I need a little bit of clarity on that. Like, um, for me, like some of the tags, some of that vagueness can be a bit difficult to lock down. Like, there's a backup clip where you don't have to reload as often, but then you've got a reload thing where this weapon occasionally requires some time spent reloading. So those 2 tags can be seen as maybe the same, slightly different. Yeah,
That's true.
that could
Yeah.
be an issue for some people.
No. Yeah. Light. I have something similar with that. So the thing about Light is that Light is modular. It has currently 2 seasons, quote unquote, or season passes, basically, of expansions, additional content, ranging from strikes to additional or fleshed out mechanics. I like what's in the expansion books with Light more than I like Light on its own, I will personally admit. And I know we don't really talk very much about expansions here because we are not reviewing Light's expansions, we are reviewing Light, the game that you can get as a core book. But I will say they aren't just more expansive, they can tend to be a bit more instructional, which for a new GM, like Light is a rules light game. And Spencer Campbell has said himself that he likes to make it so that what the rules are at the game are a discussion around the table, trusting the table to do what's right for themselves rather than giving instruction. And I understand that mindset. I think that mindset does a lot more to help people who are familiar with the hobby than who might be new to the hobby. Because if you like Destiny, Light might be the tabletop game that gets you to try the hobby. And I think a little bit more GM guidance would go a long way. It doesn't have to be pre-made adventures and stuff, because I didn't touch that stuff when I was starting out. But just more new GM focused content might be a little bit more helpful in Light's core book, I think personally.
That's fair enough. And it seems like Spencer's gonna help you out there a little bit, because if you haven't been keeping up, there will be I'm forgetting the exact word phrasing, but the definitive version of Light, where
I think it's Beacon
some
Edition.
Beacon Edition, yes, where Light will be most, if not all, of the expansions, and wording will be, touched up and then like condensed into one book. So
Yes, entirely
at
worth
least
mentioning.
at least your DLC situation will be fixed. And for me, maybe some vagary will be fixed. And also, there's going to be some slight changes, so that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, you know what?
And if anything, we'll come back to this.
As a caveat to everything that we're saying right now, we are both aware of the fact that literally at the time of recording and for some time before this, Spencer has been working on I'm going to say omnibus of Light, as well as a bit of a rework to bring it more in line with Lumen. I own 2 copies of Light. The version I bought before the second season of Light ended, and I downloaded for the purpose of this review the up-to-date pay what you want version, so I could review exactly what players are going to get if they get the pay what you want version. There is a third version of Light coming. The main difference in between the 2 books, because I did read them both because it's crazy short, is art for the most part. There might have been a couple of word changes, but they were so minor I didn't notice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so our criticisms should come with that caveat, in that there is a straight up new, fully incorporated edition of Light on the way right now, and this is of the pay what you want version that is out at the time of recording, which I'm not going to bother dating. But so if you are currently owning a copy of Light Beacon Edition and are like, what the fuck do you mean it's 16 pages? That is the reason.
Yeah. But like looking through like the strike section where it talks about like what you'll be doing, yeah, it'd be cool to get some examples of, or an example of like, oh, so how should I do a strike? Like, I have an idea just because I'm a GM way before this, and maybe I have an idea because I've played Destiny and I've played a bit, so sure I can go along that vibe as well. But it would be nice to get even a loose structure. But then also, yes, the DLCs do provide examples of strikes. But in the core book, you just get dot points of setups for strikes. That's it.
Yeah. And yeah, no, that's one of the things about this, is that also, like, in tandem with the whole more expansion thing, the core book examples tend to be simple, uh very functional, very lightweight examples, and they could definitely be more, because like with strikes specifically, it's like, so like, should I have optional objectives, should like the majority of the strike be combat or environmental maneuvering, or like what are the environment options? It's yeah, basically at this point would be repeating myself about there's more guidance would go a long way, which again, future version of Light, possibly.
Yeah. And since we're talking about the core book, but then the DLCs, for people that are just picking up the core book, might be a little bit confused looking at the classes. So what is armor? What is cast? And that is because those are things in the DLC. And if you weren't aware, they were retroactively added to the classes, updated. So, you know, they were there when you are referencing your classes and using the DLC. But it is a little bit weird that this is, never mentioned when you're just reading the book straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, those are all the real criticisms I have.
This is where my other criticisms are just basically I like some of the extra stuff that Lumen brought about, and because Light was the originator of Lumen. It doesn't have some of those things. I like the GM turn that occurs with Lumen. The players get to do all their things and the enemies get to react. But then, after the players have all done their thing, I myself have like a clear cut time to be like, okay, now it's my turn to do stuff. If the players were doing really well, I still get to do, at least 2 to 3 things before the players then continue to wreck shop. And, a GM turn, clearly defines you can make some enemy moves or evolve the battlefield and introduce new goals and objectives and the like. And I like that little piece of rule. And then in the GM turn as well, yes, I do like the loot roll that occurs where, you get some benefits for how many enemies you've defeated. I do prefer that over the light pools, the light wells that occur.
It definitely keeps the
in
action
here,
up.
Yes, it keeps the action up. Well, here it's more of an attrition thing until you get to whenever the GM decides a place where you can get your light back.
Yeah, unfortunately, light has the misfortune of being the progenitor of a engine and not the definitive example of said engine, which, what happens when you come first, and it's always interesting to look back on the originators to see what they did different and how they changed over time, which is why we're doing this episode before we're doing any Lumen games.
Exactly. And so anytime I do play light, I always use the GM turn and the loot. I don't think, no, I didn't use the loot,
No,
loot roll
you've never
there,
used
but
the
I definitely
loot
used the GM turn.
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
So then, oh no, sorry, keep going.
Oh no. That's just that's it.
Well, so for me, I was gonna say let's move on to stealing from light, but if you actually do have more stuff on this, then you should finish.
No, that's it.
So stealing from light, the Lumen engine can be a really good engine, especially to start with. Me and Sun both published our first games on the Lumen engine. Sun likes the Lumen engine still. I am less of a fan entirely for personal reasons, and it has nothing to do with the functionality of the engine. It just comes down to personal taste. And the good news about that is stealing the core mechanics of light has never been easier than with the published Lumen SRD, which you can find in the links below. Because if you've ever thought, man, I really want to try game design, but I want to try something simple, and Nave doesn't speak to you, or it feels like a bit too much for you, Lumen is high action. Players are meant to be strong, so you don't have to worry about, players feeling too strong. That's the point. The idea is they are cool action heroes doing cool action hero things.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are coming into tabletop and or play a tabletop and want to maybe design something, there's probably a shared background of video games. And Lumen, making a Lumen game is really good with having that video game knowledge because, it's about Lumen's an action game where the default intention is it can emulate those video games, those looter shooters, those hack and slash types of things where you're just powerful characters that are mowing through enemies and getting cool stuff as you do that. So Lumen is definitely a very good entry point into game design. And there's plenty of examples out there with many Lumen games being developed. And for me personally, yes. Even when I, stop making Lumen games, either now or in the future, I still will always think back to the approaches instead of attributes, the automatic powers, the enemies only do stuff from players screwing up, the GM turn, where you change the battlefield up or progress the battlefield in a significant manner, and the loot roll. Just those things, I think, is generally the core concepts of Lumen. And I will, in some aspects, be inspired by those things going on in my game design journey.
Yeah, no, definitely. For me, I think one of the things about definitely light over necessarily the Lumen SRD just because you get to see it in action. Straightforward mechanics that do not take pages of explanation is fantastic for approachability, especially when, if you're doing something that can be related to a common cultural point, like a popular free video game like Destiny in Light's case. I do not like I do not like heavily narrative or vague games. I like the more mechanically gritty games personally, which is one of the reasons why the Lumen engine just isn't to my taste. It can be made gritty, but I would rather just use a gritty engine from the start personally. But your core mechanics being simple to understand and relay over the course of a page with any added complexity being granted in specific character builds or function is something that I like a lot from not just Light, but other games as well. And Light is one of the best, shortest examples of that. And I think that that is a wonderful thing because if you're writing down an explanation for something and you are not actively explaining it to someone while you're doing it, you can get lost in your own explanation. Certain things might be missing because you assume them to be natural assumptions because they're in your head, or other things like that. And if you keep your core mechanic simple, it's a lot harder to do that. And I actually am known at this point, Sun will confirm, for saying, oh, this more core mechanic requires me to keep track of 2 or 3 things. Fuck it, I'm not learning this game today. I'm not going to bother with it. And I will only come back to it after years if someone recommends it to me super heavily. I still haven't finished my
Yes.
copy of Forbidden Lands, and people have been recommending that game to me non-stop.
Yes, yes. And like Light is a good example of ignoring rules that you would expect in games to highlight what this game is about. Going back to the one-page nature, there's a lot in here that is just not explained because that's not important.
Yeah, it's not important what Spencer thinks it does mechanically. It's important what you and your table agree it does mechanically. And, for some people that approach works and it's even preferable. And honestly, to those people, more power to them. It's a great idea. I like how it's executed, not to my taste.
Yep,
But
that's fair
straightforward
enough.
mechanics absolutely would steal simple, straight, and easy to understand mechanics. Do you have another thing?
Yeah, like I've recently mentioned it to you off microphone. Um, but I was always maybe considering using index card RPGs like cards or just like plain zones as a way to represent, a Light's battlefield. Because for me personally, while I can do Theatre of the Mind and I'm all good with that, I do like having a visual representation of the thing and to still lean into the speed of Light. I think just having, you know, zones on cards and the like that I can just slap down and then maybe little objects that I can then slap down on top of those cards. It would be a good way to represent the range bands. Each card, if you're any card adjacent to you is close and you can always move into the next card. And it just provides a little bit of an easier visual representation of the field. And, leans into more of that tactical nature where if you're just explaining everything, you need to go in the more cinematic route. And I think just that one little tweak to representing movement could lean it into the more, tactical side where it might clear up some of that vagary.
Yeah, I could definitely see that because Light, what is it? I think you can move Does light even state about like a movement range, or I can't remember off the top of my head. It's either you can move into medium, or I'm thinking of another range band game that I read recently.
Yeah, between light and lumen, I think it's nearby is the range band. Nearby. Oh no, wait, we can just go to the guns,
It's like
which
close,
clearly
medium,
state as
far,
yeah, it's close, mid, and far. Yeah,
and you can like move from where you are into mid range, I think.
yeah. So one range band.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, and that is definitely like a solid tweak. And I like range bands. I actually have had conversations about doing away with the concept of weapon range altogether, but that is a conversation for another day.
that's a whole nother topic. Yeah.
But no, I definitely think like battle zones, like here's where you are and here's how things relate to you in this place, is good for theater of the mind and has to do with my getting rid of ancient
Yeah,
bands.
but no. Honestly, light really nice. If you like Destiny and want a nice quick way of playing Destiny in tabletop, look at Light. If you want a sci-fi looter shooter, you know, just go in, kill stuff, do an objective, maybe some side objectives, and continue making some factions happy, try Light out. And if
If
you want to see how Lumen came about, try Light.
uh I will say also, if you are like me and you absolutely despise Destiny because you think that the game could have a lot more potential and variety and simply lacks that fundamentally, the modular nature of Light means that you can add your own modules to it and really flesh it out as well, and that is a good thing. But I have one more thing I would like to steal.
Mhm.
So this is something I've actually stolen into my actual game design that I can actually reference. Woohoo! I really
Oh.
like the reviving mechanic where things start to get weird, and I have stolen it. I used a slightly different mechanic in a game that I will never finish called The Breach. In that game, rather than getting a die that can hurt you for crits, I made players turn into monsters that kill their allies. The Breach is weird. The Breach was meant to be a horror game where players were becoming horrible monsters, and so dying activated that. But yeah, no, I really like I like this death mechanic so much. I like it so much that it probably passively influenced the Adrenaline Die engine to a an extent. Although to what extent I
And
don't know, because that came about from a lot of incredibly specific conversations and ideas that coalesced into something that mimics two or three things somewhat, but isn't any of them outright.
mm, and I like how for my Lumen game, I was like, yeah, HP and light are a thing, but what if I just made them the same thing? Your resource to use your powers is your HP.
Yeah. So we both did something with the interesting death mechanic from Light.
Yeah, but
Uh,
no, with its simplicity and modularity, it begs you to adjust things and make your own house rules up.
but yeah, so is that everything from you?
Yeah, no, a very simple game, very straight to the point, and I don't think I could say anything more about without uh, just waffling on.
Super true. Same here. All right. Well, with that being done, I would like to thank you all for joining us today as we looked at Light. Join us next time for more discussion and indie tabletop discussion and design. I've been Oscar C. Tango, and joining me has been Sun.
You can find me at sungone_ on Twitter, sun on Start Playing Games, and sungone on itch.io.
And you can find me at Stranded TTRPG on Twitter, as Oscar C. Tango on SPG, and as Stranded Publishing on Itch. And you can find all of those links in the description. And remember, don't be afraid to adventure beyond the dragon.